The morning had started like any other December day in 1884. 23-year-old Rebecca Collins adjusted her worn leather gloves and checked the straps on her traveling bag one more time. The sky looked clear enough, with just a few gray clouds hanging low on the horizon. She had no idea that in just a few hours, those innocent-looking clouds would nearly cost her everything. Rebecca stood outside the small boarding house in Pine Ridge, watching her breath form little white puffs in the cold air. The owner, Mrs. Henderson, had warned her about traveling alone during winter, but Rebecca didn't have much choice. Her father had arranged her marriage to a wealthy store owner 3 towns over, and the wedding was set for next week. The man had sent word that he expected his bride to arrive on time, no matter what. "You sure about this, dear?" Mrs. Henderson asked, stepping outside with a cup of hot coffee. "Weather can turn mighty quick this time of year." Rebecca took the coffee gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through her cold fingers. "I have to go. Mr. Williams is expecting me, and Papa already took his money for the marriage contract." Mrs. Henderson shook her head. Men and their arrangements don't seem right. Making a young woman travel alone in winter just to meet some stranger she's supposed to marry. Rebecca had been thinking the same thing, but there was no point in complaining now. Her father had lost their small farm to debt, and this marriage was the only way to keep the family from complete ruin. She had sewn her last $50 into the hem of her blue traveling dress, hoping it might help her start fresh in her new life. The horse she had rented was a gentle mare named Daisy, brown with white patches on her face. The stable owner had assured Rebecca that Daisy knew the trail well and could make the journey in about 6 hours if the weather held. Rebecca climbed into the saddle, adjusted her heavy wool coat, and waved goodbye to Mrs. Henderson. For the first 2 hours, everything went perfectly. The trail was clear, and Daisy moved along at a steady pace. Rebecca actually began to feel hopeful about her journey. Maybe this marriage wouldn't be so bad after all. Mr. Williams had written that he owned the largest general store in Silver Creek and could provide a comfortable life. She tried not to think about the fact that she had never even seen a photograph of him. The first snowflakes started falling around noon, just as Rebecca stopped to rest Daisy and eat some bread and cheese. The flakes were big and soft, floating down like cotton balls. It looked pretty, almost magical. Rebecca had always loved snow, and she smiled as she watched it dust the pine trees along the trail. "Just a little snow, Daisy," she said, patting the horse's neck. "Nothing to worry about." But within an hour, that gentle snowfall had turned into something completely different. The wind picked up, sending the snow sideways instead of straight down. The flakes got smaller and harder, stinging Rebecca's face like tiny needles. She pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth, but it didn't help much. Daisy started moving slower, shaking her head against the wind. The trail, which had been so clear that morning, was quickly disappearing under a growing blanket of white. Rebecca began to worry. She had never been caught in a real blizzard before, and this was starting to look like more than just a winter shower. By 3 o'clock, Rebecca could barely see 10 feet in front of her. The wind was howling now, and the snow was coming down so thick it looked like a white wall. Daisy kept stopping, unsure which way to go. The trail markers that should have guided them were completely hidden. "Come on, girl," Rebecca urged, but her voice was lost in the wind. She was getting scared now. Her fingers were so cold she could barely feel the reins, and snow was getting inside her coat, despite her efforts to stay covered. That's when disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind brought down a heavy tree branch right in front of them. Daisy reared up in fright, and Rebecca, with her numb fingers, couldn't hold on tight enough. She fell hard into the snow, landing on her side with a painful thud that knocked the breath out of her. Daisy, spooked and confused, took off running back the way they had come. Rebecca called after her, but the horse disappeared into the white storm within seconds. Now she was completely alone, sitting in snow that was already up to her waist, with no idea which direction led to safety. Rebecca struggled to her feet, her left shoulder aching from the fall. She looked around desperately, trying to find any landmark or sign of the trail, but everything looked the same now, just endless white in every direction. The wind was so loud she couldn't even hear her own thoughts clearly. She started walking, hoping to find shelter or at least get her blood moving to stay warm. Each step was a struggle through the deep snow. Her long dress kept getting tangled around her legs, and her leather boots, which had seemed fine for traveling, were definitely not made for walking through blizzards. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Rebecca's legs felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. The cold was seeping through her coat, and she couldn't feel her toes anymore. Worse, she was starting to feel sleepy, which she knew was a bad sign. Her grandmother had once told her that when people got too cold, they felt tired right before they froze to death. Just when Rebecca thought she might have to sit down and rest, she saw something dark ahead through the swirling snow. At first, she thought it might be rocks or trees, but as she got closer she realized it was a building, a barn, old and weathered but solid-looking. Rebecca stumbled toward it as fast as she could manage. The barn's big wooden doors were closed, but there was a smaller door on the side. She tried the handle with her stiff fingers, but it was stuck. She pushed harder, using her shoulder, and finally it creaked open. Inside, the barn was dark but blessedly quiet after the howling wind. Rebecca could smell hay and leather and the warm scent of animals, though she couldn't see any cows or horses in the dim light. It was still cold, but without the wind it felt like paradise compared to outside. She found a pile of hay in one corner and sank down into it, pulling her coat tight around her. Her whole body was shaking now, and she couldn't make it stop. She tried to rub her hands together to get feeling back into them, but they felt like blocks of ice. Rebecca knew she was in serious trouble. Even with the barn protecting her from the wind, it was still freezing cold. She didn't have any way to make a fire, and her clothes were damp from the snow. She could hear the storm getting worse outside, the wind rattling the barn walls. She tried to stay awake, knowing that falling asleep in this cold could be dangerous. She thought about her family back home, wondering if they would ever know what happened to her. She thought about Mr. Williams waiting for his bride who would never arrive. Mostly, she tried not to think about how scared she was. Time seemed to move strangely. Sometimes Rebecca felt like she had been in the barn for days, and sometimes it seemed like only minutes had passed. The light coming through the cracks in the walls grew dimmer as evening approached. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Rebecca's shaking was getting worse and she was having trouble thinking clearly. She kept forgetting where she was or how she had gotten there. Her eyelids felt heavy, and it was getting harder to keep them open. She knew this was bad, but she felt too tired to care anymore. She was just starting to drift off when she heard something that made her heart jump. Footsteps in the snow outside, and a voice calling out over the wind. At first she thought she might be imagining it, but then she heard it again. Definitely a man's voice, though she couldn't make out the words. Rebecca tried to call back, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. She struggled to get up from the hay pile, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Everything felt heavy and slow, like she was moving underwater. The small side door of the barn creaked open and a beam of yellow light cut through the darkness. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway holding a lantern. Rebecca could see snow covering his hat and coat, and his breath made clouds in the cold air. "Well, I'll be," the man said, his voice deep and surprised. "Ma'am, what in the world are you doing out here?" Rebecca tried to answer, but she was shaking too hard to speak clearly. The man stepped closer, holding his lantern higher to get a better look at her. In the light, she could see he had a kind face, weathered by years of outdoor work, with concerned brown eyes. "You're near frozen solid," he said, setting the lantern down and kneeling beside her. "How long have you been out in this storm?" I don't know," Rebecca managed to say through chattering teeth. "My horse ran away. I couldn't find the trail." The man nodded grimly. "This blizzard came up fast. Caught me by surprise too, and I've been ranching in these parts for 10 years. He looked her over carefully. "Can you stand up? We need to get you someplace warm and fast." Rebecca tried to push herself up, but her legs gave out. The man caught her before she could fall back into the hay. She could feel how strong he was, and how warm, even through his thick coat. "That's all right," he said gently. "I'm going to carry you to my cabin. It's not far, and I've got a good fire going." Rebecca wanted to protest that she could walk, that she didn't want to be a burden, but she was too cold and tired to argue. The man wrapped his own coat around her on top of her wet one, then lifted her easily in his arms. The warm soup helped Rebecca stop shaking, but Ben could see she was still in serious trouble. Her lips had a bluish tint, and her fingers were white at the tips. He had seen frostbite before, and he knew they weren't out of danger yet. "How long? Were you out in that storm?" Ben asked, sitting across from her with his own cup of coffee. "I'm not sure," Rebecca said, her voice still weak. "It started snowing around noon, but it got bad fast. Maybe 3 or 4 hours total." Ben nodded grimly. 4 hours in a blizzard was enough to kill someone, especially someone not dressed for it. Rebecca's traveling clothes were meant for a comfortable coach ride, not for surviving in the wilderness. "Let me see your hands," Ben said gently. Rebecca held out her hands, still wrapped in the blanket. Ben examined her fingers carefully, his face serious. 2 of her fingertips were completely white, and they didn't have any feeling in them at all. "This is frostbite," Ben said honestly. "Not too bad yet, but we need to warm these up slowly and carefully. If we do it wrong, you could lose these fingers." Rebecca's eyes went wide with fear. "Lose them?" "Not if we're careful," Ben assured her quickly. "I've dealt with this before. My partner got frostbite 2 winters ago, and he kept all his fingers. But it took time and patience." Ben filled a basin with lukewarm water, testing the temperature with his elbow like he was preparing a baby's bath. "This might hurt at first," he warned. "When frozen skin starts to warm up, it can be pretty painful." He was right. When Rebecca put her hands in the water, it felt like someone was sticking needles into her fingers. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears came to her eyes anyway. "I know it hurts," Ben said sympathetically, "but that pain means the feeling is coming back. That's a good thing." While Rebecca soaked her hands, Ben checked her feet. Her leather boots had kept most of the snow out, but her toes were still dangerously cold. He helped her soak her feet in another basin of warm water, and gradually the painful tingling started there too. "Where were you traveling from?" Ben asked, trying to distract her from the discomfort. "Pine Ridge," Rebecca said through gritted teeth. "I was supposed to be in Silver Creek by evening. There's a man there, Mr. Williams. He's expecting me." "Expecting you for what?" Ben asked, though something in her tone made him think he already knew the answer. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. She hardly knew this man, but he had saved her life. And there was something about his honest, open face that made her want to tell him the truth. "We're supposed to be married next week," she said finally. "It's an arrangement my father made. Mr. Williams paid him, and in return, he gets a wife." Ben's jaw tightened slightly. He had heard of such arrangements, and he didn't much like them. "Have you met this Mr. Williams?" "No," Rebecca admitted. "We've exchanged a few letters, but I've never seen him. Papa says he's a successful businessman and that I should be grateful for such a good match." "And are you?" Ben asked quietly. "Grateful?" Rebecca looked up at him, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked her how she felt about the marriage. Her father had simply told her it was happening, and her mother had helped her pack without ever asking if she wanted to go. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I suppose I should be. My family needs the money, and Mr. Williams can provide for me. What more should a woman want?" Ben didn't answer right away, but Rebecca could see something sad in his eyes. He got up to add more wood to the fire, and she noticed how he moved, quietly, carefully, like someone who was used to living alone. "How long have you lived here?" Rebecca asked. 3 years, Ben said, sitting back down. "I came out here after my wife died. Thought maybe a change of scenery would help." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly. "That must have been very hard." Ben nodded. "Mary was the best person I ever knew. She got sick one winter and there wasn't anything the doctor could do. After she passed, I couldn't stand being in the same town anymore. Everything reminded me of her." "Do you ever regret coming out here? Living alone, I mean?" "Sometimes," Ben said honestly. "It gets lonely, especially in winter, but it's peaceful too. No one telling me what to do or how to live." I can work my land, take care of my animals, and not have to worry about anyone else's expectations. Rebecca thought about that as she soaked her hands and feet. She had never lived alone, never made her own decisions about anything important. She had gone from her father's house to Mr. Williams's house. She wondered what it would be like to wake up each morning and decide for herself what to do with the day. By evening, the feeling had come back to most of Rebecca's fingers and toes. The pain was intense at first, but gradually it faded to a dull ache. Ben bandaged the worst of the frostbitten areas and made her more hot soup. "The storm's still going strong," Ben said, looking out the window. "You won't be able to travel for at least another day, maybe 2. Rebecca felt a mix of relief and worry. She was grateful to be safe and warm, but she knew Mr. Williams would be expecting her. What would he think when she didn't arrive on time? "I should try to send word somehow," she said. "Let him know what happened." "Nearest town with a telegraph is a day's ride in good weather," Ben said. "And this storm isn't letting up anytime soon. Don't worry about it tonight, get some rest, and we'll figure things out when the weather clears." As the evening went on, Rebecca found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Ben was easy to talk to, and he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle he raised and the horses he trained. She told him about her family, about the little farm where she had grown up, and about her dreams of maybe teaching school someday. "You wanted to be a teacher?" Ben asked with interest. "I still do, I suppose," Rebecca said. "But married women don't usually work outside the home. Mr. Williams made it clear in his letters that he expects a traditional wife." "What if you could do both?" Ben asked. "Be married and still teach?" Rebecca laughed, but not because it was funny. What man would allow his wife to work? It would be like saying he couldn't provide for her properly. "The right man would," Ben said quietly. "A good husband would want his wife to be happy, to use her talents." Rebecca looked at him curiously. "Is that how it was with your wife?" Ben smiled, the first really happy expression Rebecca had seen on his face. "Mary was a seamstress and a good one. She made clothes for half the women in town. I was proud of her work, proud that people sought her out. It made her happy, and that made me happy." Rebecca felt a strange ache in her chest. She tried to imagine Mr. Williams saying something like that, but she couldn't. His letters had been all about what he expected from a wife. A clean house, good meals, children, and no trouble. When it came time to sleep, Ben insisted that Rebecca take his bed while he slept on the floor by the fire. She protested, but he wouldn't hear of it. "You nearly died today," he said firmly. "You need proper rest to recover. Don't worry about me. I've slept on worse floors than this one." Rebecca lay in Ben's bed, listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet sounds of him settling down by the fire. The bed smelled like leather and pine soap, clean and masculine. She felt safer than she had in a long time, which was strange, since she was alone with a man she had just met. But there was something about Ben that made her trust him completely. Maybe it was the way he had cared for her frostbite so gently, or the way he talked about his late wife with such love and respect. Or maybe it was simply that he had saved her life without asking for anything in return. Rebecca woke up several times during the night, confused about where she was. Each time she would remember the storm, the barn and Ben's rescue, and each time she felt that same sense of safety wash over her. The next morning, Rebecca woke to the smell of bacon cooking and coffee brewing. The storm was still going, but it seemed less violent than the night before. Ben was already up, dressed, and making breakfast. "How are you feeling?" he asked when he saw her stirring. "Better," Rebecca said, and she meant it. The shaking had stopped, and most of the pain in her hands and feet was gone. "Thank you for taking such good care of me." "Just glad I found you." "When I did," Ben said. "Another hour or two and—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Rebecca knew what he meant. Over breakfast, they talked about practical things. The storm would probably blow itself out by evening, Ben thought, but the snow would be too deep for travel for another day after that. Rebecca tried not to think about how angry Mr. Williams might be when she finally arrived. "Tell me more about This Mr. Williams, Ben said carefully. What kind of man is he? Rebecca described what she knew from his letters. Successful, established, looking for a wife to help him run his household and bear his children. It all sounded very proper and reasonable when she said it out loud, but Ben's expression grew, more troubled as she talked. Has he asked you anything about what you want? Ben asked. Your interests, your hopes for the future? Rebecca thought about it. Not really. He asked if I could cook and keep house and if I was healthy enough to have children. He said he hoped I was obedient and even-tempered. Ben was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca, he said finally, can I ask you something personal? She nodded. Do you want to marry this man? The question hung in the air between them. Rebecca opened, her mouth to give the automatic answer. Of course she did, it was a good match. The second day brought a strange kind of peace to the little cabin. The storm was still raging outside, but inside, Rebecca and Ben settled into an easy routine. She helped him with simple tasks around the cabin while her hands continued to heal, and he told her stories about ranch life that made her laugh despite her worries. You're telling me that cow actually learned to open the gate? Rebecca asked, stirring a pot of stew while Ben mended a bridle by the fire. I swear on my mother's grave, Ben said with a grin. Betsy was the smartest cow I ever met, and the most stubborn. She figured out how to lift the latch with her nose, and then she'd let all the other cows out too. I'd wake up every morning to find my whole herd scattered across 3 counties. What did you do? Had to get a new kind of latch, one she couldn't figure out. But I'll tell you, I almost admired her for it. Takes real determination to learn something like that. Rebecca smiled as she tasted the stew. Cooking on Ben's simple stove was different from the big kitchen back home, but she was getting the hang of it, and Ben seemed genuinely appreciative of her efforts, unlike her father, who had always treated her cooking as something she owed him. This is delicious, Ben said when they sat down to eat. You're a fine cook, Rebecca. Thank you, she said, and felt herself blush slightly. My mother taught me well. She always said a woman needs to know how to feed her family properly. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. What's she like? Rebecca thought about her mother, quiet, hard-working, always putting everyone else's needs before her own. She's good to us, Rebecca said carefully. She works very hard, but she never talks much about what she thinks or feels. I'm not sure she thinks her opinions matter much. Everyone's opinions matter, Ben said firmly, especially in their own family. Rebecca looked at him with curiosity. You really believe that? That women's thoughts are as important as men's? Of course I do. Why wouldn't they be? It was such a simple question, but Rebecca found herself struggling to answer it. All her life, she had been taught that men made the important decisions while women followed them. Her father decided where the family would live, how money would be spent, who his daughters would marry. Her mother's job was to support those decisions, not question them. I guess I never thought about it that way, Rebecca said honestly. Ben set down his spoon and looked at her seriously. Rebecca, can I tell you something about my Mary? She nodded. Mary was the one who convinced me to leave farming and try ranching instead. I thought she was crazy at first. What did a woman know about cattle? But she had been watching the market, paying attention to what was happening with the railroad. She saw that beef was going to be more profitable than grain, and she was right. If I had stuck to farming like I wanted to, I'd probably be broke by now. Rebecca stared at him. Your wife made business decisions? She made all kinds of decisions. We talked everything over together. Money, the ranch, our future plans. She was smarter than me about most things, and I wasn't fool enough to ignore good advice just because it came from a woman. This was so different from anything Rebecca had ever known that she could barely wrap her mind around it. In her family, her father made all the decisions, and her mother simply carried them out. The idea that a husband and wife might be partners, might actually listen to each other's ideas, was completely foreign to her. Were you? Rebecca struggled to find the right words. Were you happy together? Ben's face lit up with a smile that made him look years younger. happier than I ever thought possible. We were best friends, you know. We could talk for hours about anything and everything, and we laughed together every day, right up until she got sick. Rebecca felt that strange ache in her chest again. She tried to imagine having that kind of relationship with Mr. Williams, but it seemed impossible. His letters had been polite but formal, focused on practical matters. He had never asked her about her thoughts or opinions, never expressed any interest in her as a person beyond her ability to be a suitable wife. "How did you know?" Rebecca asked quietly. "That she was the right person for you?" Ben thought for a moment. "I suppose it was the way I felt when I was with her. Like I could be completely myself, you know? I didn't have to pretend to be smarter or tougher or more successful than I was. She liked me just as I was, and I felt the same about her." Rebecca nodded, though she wasn't sure she really understood. She had never felt that comfortable with anyone, male or female. She had always been too busy trying to be what other people expected her to be. After dinner, Ben pulled out a deck of worn playing cards. "Do you know how to play poker?" Rebecca laughed. "My father would have a fit if he knew I was even in the same room as playing cards. He says gambling is a sin." "Good thing he's not here then," Ben said with a mischievous grin. "Come on, I'll teach you. We don't have to bet money. We can use dried beans." For the next 2 hours, Ben taught Rebecca the basics of poker. She turned out to have a natural talent for it, much to his surprise and delight. She was good at reading his expressions and figuring out when he was bluffing, and she had a poker face that would have impressed professional gamblers. "You're a quick learner," Ben said as Rebecca won another hand. "And sneaky too. I had no idea you were holding 3 queens." "Maybe I'm just lucky," Rebecca said innocently, though the slight twinkle in her eye suggested otherwise. "Lucky, my foot. You've been counting cards, haven't you?" Rebecca giggled. Actually giggled, something she couldn't remember doing since she was a little girl. "Maybe a little. Numbers have always made sense to me." "What other hidden talents are you hiding?" Ben asked, dealing another hand. Rebecca thought about it. "I can read and write better than most men in our town. I love books, especially stories about faraway places. I can do sums in my head faster than most people can do them on paper. And I once helped our neighbor deliver a calf when the doctor couldn't get there in time." "Now that's impressive," Ben said with genuine admiration. "Sounds like you could do just about anything you set your mind to." No one had ever said anything like that to Rebecca before. Her talents had always been treated as nice extras, useful but not particularly important. The idea that someone thought she was capable of real accomplishment was both thrilling and terrifying. As the evening wore on, their conversation grew more personal. Ben told Rebecca about his childhood on a small farm in Ohio, about the dreams he and Mary had shared, about the loneliness he felt after losing her. Rebecca found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about the books she read in secret, about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday, about the way she sometimes felt trapped in her own life. "Do you think it's wrong to want more than what you have?" Rebecca asked as they cleaned up the cards. "Depends on what you mean by more," Ben said thoughtfully. "If you mean wanting to hurt other people to get ahead, then yes, that's wrong. But if you mean wanting to grow, to learn, to become the best version of yourself, then no, I don't think that's wrong at all. I think it's human nature." "But what if wanting more means disappointing the people you love?" Ben was quiet for a long moment. "Rebecca, can I ask you something that might be hard to hear?" She nodded, though her heart started beating faster. "Are you sure the people you're worried about disappointing actually love you? Or do they just love what you can do for them?" The question hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to protest, to say of course her family loved her, but the words wouldn't come. When she really thought about it, she realized that her father's affection had always been conditional on her obedience. And Mr. Williams, well, Mr. Williams didn't even know her well enough to love her. He just wanted a wife who would fit his requirements. "I don't know," she whispered, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "I'm sorry," Ben said gently. "I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that, well, you seem like such a remarkable person. Smart, capable, kind. You deserve to be with people who see that and value it. Rebecca looked at him through tears she hadn't realized were falling. How can you say that? You barely know me. I know. Enough, Ben said firmly. I know you're brave. You were traveling alone in winter to meet a stranger, and that takes courage. I know you're kind. You've been helping me around here without being asked, even though you're the one who was injured. I know you're intelligent. The way you picked up poker so quickly proves that. And I know you have a good heart because I can see it in your eyes. No one had ever described Rebecca that way before. In her family, she was known as the dutiful daughter, the one who never caused trouble. Mr. Williams saw her as a potential wife who met his practical requirements, but Ben saw her as a person with her own worth and value, and that was something entirely new. Ben, she said softly, can I ask you something? Anything. If you could do anything with your life, anything at all, what would it be? Ben smiled. You know, I used to have big dreams when I was younger. I wanted to travel, see the country, maybe even go to California. But then I met Mary and my dreams changed. All I wanted was to build a good life with her. After she died, I thought maybe those old dreams would come back, but they haven't. Now I think what I want most is to not be so lonely anymore. Don't you get lonely out here by yourself? The third morning dawned clear and bright, with golden sunlight streaming through the cabin windows. The storm had finally blown itself out during the night, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Rebecca stood at the window, looking out at the pristine white landscape, and felt her heart sink. The end of the storm meant she would have to leave this peaceful haven and face the reality of her situation. Ben was already outside, digging a path from the cabin to the barn. Rebecca watched him work, noting the easy strength in his movements and the way the morning light caught in his dark hair. She had grown so comfortable here, so safe and content, that it was hard to remember this wasn't her real life. The main trail should be passable by this afternoon, Ben said when he came back inside, stamping snow off his boots. I can ride. With you partway to Silver Creek, make sure you get there safely. Rebecca nodded, though the thought of leaving made her stomach tight with anxiety. I should write a letter to Mr. Williams explaining why I'm late. That's a good idea, Ben agreed. I have paper and ink over there on the shelf. Rebecca sat down to write, but found herself staring at the blank page for a long time. How could she explain the past 3 days? How could she put into words what had happened to her here? The way her entire understanding of herself and her life had shifted. In the end, she wrote a simple, polite letter explaining that she had been caught in the storm and delayed, but that she would arrive as soon as travel was safe. She didn't mention Ben by name, just said she had found shelter and been well cared for. It felt like a lie by omission, but she didn't know what else to do. They were just finishing lunch when they heard the sound of horses approaching. Ben went to the window and frowned. 3 riders, he said, his voice suddenly tense. Coming up the main trail. Rebecca joined him at the window and felt her blood run cold. She recognized the lead rider immediately. It was Tom Bradley, one of Mr. Williams's men. She had met him briefly when he delivered one of Mr. Williams' letters to her father. Oh no, she whispered. They're from Silver Creek, from Mr. Williams. Ben's face darkened. Stay away from the window, he said quietly. Let me handle this. The riders stopped in front of the cabin and Tom Bradley called out in a loud, demanding voice. Hello, the cabin. We're looking for a missing woman, young lady named Rebecca Collins. Her horse came back to town without her. Ben opened the door but didn't step outside. What business is it of yours? He called back. She's promised to marry Mr. Henry Williams, Bradley replied. He's very concerned about her welfare. We tracked her horse's trail to this area before the storm hit. Rebecca pressed herself against the wall beside the window, her heart pounding. She could hear every word clearly, and what she heard made her feel sick. Mr. Williams is offering a reward for her safe return, Bradley continued. But he wants it understood that she belongs to him now. Any man who interferes with that arrangement will answer to him personally. Is that a threat? Ben's voice was calm, but Rebecca could hear the steel underneath. Just a statement of fact, Bradley said. Mr. Williams doesn't like it when people take what's his. Now have you seen this woman or not? Ben was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca held her breath. She watched through a crack in the curtain as he stepped fully outside, pulling the door closed behind him. Can't say that I have, Ben said evenly. Been holed up here during the storm, same as everyone else. Mind if we take a look around? Bradley asked, but his tone suggested it wasn't really a request. Actually, I do mind, Ben said firmly. This is my property and you're not welcome on it. I've told you I haven't seen your missing woman, that should be enough. Rebecca could see Bradley's face through the window, and she didn't like what she saw there. The man's expression was cold and calculating, with a cruel twist to his mouth that made her skin crawl. You know Cooper, Bradley said, and Rebecca was surprised that he knew Ben's name. Mr. Williams has been asking around about you. Seems you used to have quite a reputation with a gun back before you settled down to playing rancher. That was a long time ago, Ben said quietly. Maybe so. But Mr. Williams, he's got a long memory and a lot of men on his payroll. Men who are good with guns themselves. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings to happen out here where nobody would notice. The threat was clear, and Rebecca felt terror wash over her. These men were dangerous and they were threatening Ben because of her. She couldn't let him get hurt trying to protect her. She was about to step outside and reveal herself when she heard Bradley speak again, and his words froze her in place. Of course, Mr. Williams is a patient man, Bradley continued with a nasty smile. He knows that sometimes a bride needs a little breaking in before she settles down proper. Seems his last wife had some spirit too before she learned her place. His last wife? One of the other riders asked. I thought you said this Collins girl was going to be his first wife. Bradley laughed, a sound with no humor in it. First wife he's married legal maybe, but Agnes, now she was special, real pretty, like this Collins girl. Too bad she turned out to be so clumsy. Always falling downstairs, walking into doors. Finally took a fall that broke her neck. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. The casual way Bradley talked about this Agnes woman, the implication that her accidents hadn't been accidents at all, made Rebecca feel sick to her stomach. Anyway, Bradley continued, Mr. Williams learned from that experience. He's got a special room fixed up in his house now, real secure. Place where a new wife can stay while she learns how to behave properly. Amazing how a few weeks in a locked room can change a woman's attitude. Rebecca had to press her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. This wasn't marriage they were talking about, it was imprisonment, possibly worse. And her father had sold her to this monster for the price of his debts. I think you gentlemen need to leave, Ben said, and his voice was deadly quiet. Right now. Now don't get unfriendly, Cooper, Bradley said. But Rebecca could see him eyeing Ben more cautiously now. We're just doing our job, but we'll be back if that woman turns up. And next time, we might not be so polite about searching. The three men rode away, but slowly, making it clear they weren't intimidated. Rebecca stayed pressed against the wall until she couldn't hear their horses anymore, then sank down onto the floor, shaking. Ben came back inside and found her there, tears streaming down her face. He knelt beside her immediately, his face full of concern. Rebecca, what's wrong? They're gone now, they can't hurt you. You don't understand, Rebecca whispered through her tears. They weren't just looking for me. They were. Ben, they were talking about his last wife, about how she died, and about a locked room where he keeps women until they learn to behave. Ben's face went white, then dark with anger. What exactly did you hear? Rebecca repeated the conversation as best she could remember, watching Ben's expression grow more and more grim. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca, he said finally, you can't go to Silver Creek. You can't marry this man. But I have to, Rebecca said desperately. My father took his money. If I don't show up, Mr. Williams will come after my family, and after you for hiding me. Then we'll figure out another way, Ben said firmly. We'll pay him back somehow. But I won't let you walk into that situation knowing what we know now. How can we pay him back? It was more money than my father made in 3 years. And even if we could, what then? Where would I go? What would I do? Ben took her hands in his, looking directly into her eyes. Rebecca, I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for 3 days. But stay here. With me. Rebecca's heart jumped. Ben, I can't. It wouldn't be proper. People would talk. Then marry me, Ben said simply. I know it's not ideal asking like this. I know you barely know me. But I care about you, Rebecca. More than I ever thought I could care about anyone again. And I hope, that you might feel something for me too. Rebecca stared at him, her mind reeling. Did she feel something for Ben? She thought about the past 3 days, about the way he had cared for her, listened to her, treated her like an equal. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how comfortable, how truly seen. I do feel something for you, she admitted quietly. But Ben, this is all happening so fast. 3 days ago, I had never seen you before. How can we make such a huge decision based on so little time? Because sometimes you just know, Ben said gently. Mary used to say that the heart recognizes what the mind hasn't figured out yet. And my heart is telling me that you're the person I want to spend my life with. Rebecca wanted to say yes. Every part of her wanted to say yes. But the practical side of her mind was screaming warnings. What about Mr. Williams? She asked. He'll come looking for me. He'll cause trouble for both of us. Let him come, Ben said grimly. I'm not the same man I was when I first came out here. I've been living quietly, but I haven't forgotten how to defend myself. And I know people in town who'll stand with us if we need help. And my family? They'll be ruined if I don't go through with this marriage. Ben was quiet for a moment, thinking. How much money are we talking about? $50, Rebecca said. It might as well be $50,000 for all my father could pay it back. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity and planning. Ben and Rebecca knew they didn't have much time before Williams and his men would return, possibly with more force. They had to act quickly if they wanted to have any chance of building a life together. Ben rode into the nearest town, Cedar Falls, to find a preacher and arrange their marriage. He also stopped at the bank to withdraw his savings, $48.37. Everything he had managed to save during his 3 years of ranching. It wasn't quite enough to repay Williams, but Ben figured he could make up the difference somehow. While Ben was gone, Rebecca wrote 2 letters. The first was to her parents, explaining her decision and promising to send money when she could to help with their situation. The second was to Henry Williams, formally breaking their engagement and offering repayment of his money. She tried to keep the letter polite but firm, not mentioning what she had learned about his treatment of women. When Ben returned, he brought good news and bad news. The good news was that Pastor Miller had agreed to marry them that very evening. The bad news was that word of Rebecca's presence at Ben's ranch had somehow gotten around town. Williams has been asking questions, Ben reported grimly. Offering money for information about you. Someone in town must have seen me with you when we came in, because Bradley and his men showed up about an hour after we left. Rebecca felt her heart sink. What did Pastor Miller say? Is he still willing to perform the ceremony? He is, Ben said, but he warned me that Williams is claiming you're his legal property because of the marriage contract. Miller says that's not true. A woman can't be forced into marriage against her will, no matter what papers her father signed. But Williams has money and influence, and he's not above using intimidation to get what he wants. That evening, as the sun was setting behind the mountains, Rebecca Collins became Rebecca Cooper in a simple ceremony in Pastor Miller's small church. The only witnesses were the pastor's wife and the town doctor, both of whom had promised to keep the marriage secret for as long as possible. Rebecca wore her blue traveling dress, cleaned and mended from her ordeal in the storm. Ben wore his best shirt and a nervous smile. The ceremony was nothing like the grand wedding Rebecca had once dreamed of as a little girl. But when Ben slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and kissed her gently, she felt more joy than she had ever imagined possible. Well, Mrs. Cooper, Ben said softly as they walked back to their horse, Ready to start our new life? Ready, Rebecca said, though her stomach was tight with worry about what that new life might bring. They made it back to the ranch without incident, but both of them kept watching the trail behind them. Rebecca had insisted on learning to use Ben's rifle, and he had spent the afternoon teaching her the basics. She wasn't a natural shot like some women, but she was determined and careful, and Ben said that counted for more than talent sometimes. For 2 blissful days they lived as newlyweds. Rebecca threw herself into making the cabin more comfortable, while Ben worked on improvements to the ranch that he had been putting off. They talked about their plans for the future, expanding the herd, maybe building a larger house, starting a family someday. But their peace was shattered on the 3rd morning when 6 riders appeared on the horizon, approaching fast. Rebecca recognized Tom Bradley immediately, and the man riding beside him had to be Henry Williams himself, a tall, well-dressed man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. "Get inside," Ben told Rebecca quietly. "Take the rifle and stay away from the windows." "I'm not hiding," Rebecca said firmly. "This is my fight too." Ben looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The riders were already in the yard. Williams dismounted and walked toward the cabin with the confidence of a man who was used to getting his way. "Cooper," he called out. "I know you've got my property in there. Send her out and we'll call this whole thing a misunderstanding." Ben stepped outside with Rebecca right behind him despite his earlier instructions. She wanted Williams to see her face when she refused him. "Mr. Williams," Rebecca said calmly, though her heart was racing. "I'm no longer your property if I ever was. I've sent you a letter explaining my decision to break our engagement. The money you paid my father will be returned to you." Williams looked her up and down with an expression that made Rebecca's skin crawl. "You seem to be confused about how this works, my dear. Your father accepted my payment and signed a legal contract. You belong to me now, whether you like it or not." "That's not how the law works," Ben said firmly. "A woman can't be bought and sold like cattle. She has the right to refuse marriage to anyone." Williams laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "The law is what I say it is in this territory, Cooper. I own the sheriff, the judge, and half the territorial government. And what I say is that this woman is coming back with me." "Over my dead body," Ben said quietly. "That can be arranged," Williams replied, his hand moving to rest on his gun. "In fact, I was hoping you'd say something like that. You see, I don't like it when men take things that belong to me. It sets a bad example. I don't belong to you," Rebecca said angrily, stepping forward. "I never did, and I never will. I'm married now, Mr. Williams, to a good man who treats me with respect and kindness. Something you clearly know nothing about." Williams' face darkened with rage. "Married? You can't be married to anyone else. You're already promised to me." "The promise was broken the moment you showed your true nature," Rebecca said, surprised by her own courage. "I know what happened to Agnes, Mr. Williams. I know about your locked room and your idea of how to train a wife. Did you really think I would willingly walk into that?" The mention of Agnes made Williams go completely still, and Rebecca saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said softly. "Don't I? Then why don't you tell your men here how Agnes died? Tell them about all those convenient accidents she had." Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, and Rebecca realized that even Williams' own men might not know the full truth about what he had done to his previous wife. "Enough!" Williams snapped. "Bradley, take the woman. If Cooper tries to stop you, kill him." But as Bradley moved to dismount, a new voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Everyone turned to see Pastor Miller walking up the trail, accompanied by the town doctor and 3 other men Rebecca didn't recognize. All of them were armed. "Pastor Miller," Williams said with forced politeness, "this is none of your concern. When a member of my congregation is being threatened, it becomes my concern," Miller replied calmly. "Mrs. Cooper was legally married in my church 3 days ago. Any attempt to abduct her would be kidnapping under territorial law." "Mrs. Cooper?" Williams repeated, his voice shaking with rage. "She can't be Mrs. Cooper. She's engaged to me." "A woman engaged to one man is perfectly free to marry another if she chooses," the doctor said. I witnessed the ceremony myself. It was completely legal. Williams looked around at the faces surrounding him, clearly realizing that his position wasn't as strong as he had thought. The townspeople were respectable citizens, and their word would carry weight even in a corrupt court system. "This isn't over," he said finally, his voice low and threatening. "I don't care if she's married or not. I paid good money for that woman, and I'm going to get what I paid for." "Actually," Rebecca said, reaching into her dress pocket, "it is over." She pulled out a small leather pouch and tossed it at Williams's feet. "There's your money, Mr. Williams. Every cent my father received from you, plus interest. Our business is concluded." Williams stared at the pouch in shock. "Where did you get this money?" "From my husband," Rebecca said proudly. "A man who values my happiness more than his own comfort. Something you could never understand." For a moment, Williams looked like he might draw his gun anyway. Consequences be damned. But the presence of so many witnesses, all of them armed and clearly supporting Ben and Rebecca, made him think twice. "This isn't finished," he said finally, remounting his horse. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it? I have a long memory, Cooper, and plenty of patience. Someday, when you least expect it, I'll collect what's owed to me." "If you ever set foot on my property again," Ben said quietly, "I'll kill you." "That's not a threat, Williams. It's a promise." Williams and his men rode away, but not before Williams turned back one last time to glare at Rebecca. "Enjoy your little victory while you can, my dear. It won't last forever." After they were gone, Pastor Miller and the other townspeople stayed, for a while, making sure Williams wasn't planning to circle back. The doctor examined Rebecca's frostbitten fingers, which were healing well, and declared her fit and healthy. "How did you know to come?" Rebecca asked Pastor Miller gratefully. "Ben sent word yesterday," Miller explained. "Asked me to gather some men in case there was trouble. Good thing, too. Williams has been making threats all over town about what he'd do when he found you." "Is it really over?" Rebecca asked Ben later that evening as they sat by the fire in their cabin. "Can he really force me to go with him?" "Not legally," Ben said firmly. "You're my wife now, and that's recognized by law, but Williams isn't the type to give up easily. We'll need to be careful for a while."